September 1889. The train from Denver to Cheyenne slowed at Elk Creek Pass, exactly as it always did on that curve. She had counted on that. Cassidy Vane was 24 years old, and she was the only woman on the roof of that train, which was not something she had planned, but was, she was beginning to realize, going to be the most memorable part of her evening. The moment the train slowed, she dropped through the open window of the mail car. There were two men inside. They saw her before she saw them. She had a problem. The problem was that one of the two men was a deputy U.S. Marshal named John Prater, who had been riding in that car for 6 days, waiting for exactly this. He had not been waiting for her specifically. He had been waiting for the robbery. And what neither of them had been prepared for was what happened in the next 4 minutes. John Prater was considered, by most accounts, an exceptionally capable deputy marshal. He had 12 arrests to his name, no escapes, and a reputation for absolute calm under pressure. He let Cassidy Vane walk out of that mail car with an empty bag and both hands raised, and he told her to run and not come back. No arrest, no report, no record. In 20 years of frontier law, it was the only time John Prater ever did anything like that. The story of why he did it is the story of every year that came before that night, and every year that came after. Neither of them told it while they were alive, but they each left letters, and those letters, together, tell a love story that the frontier never got around to recording. The railroad had changed the American West faster than anything before it. By 1889, the tracks stretched from coast to coast. The cattle drives were ending. Beef could be shipped by rail, which meant you no longer needed a cowboy to drive a herd 1,000 miles. Mining towns rose and collapsed in the span of months. Settlers arrived in numbers that would have been unimaginable 20 years earlier. And with the prosperity came the crime. Train robberies were, in the 1880s, both a serious economic problem and a genuine cultural phenomenon. The James Younger Gang, the Wild Bunch, the Dalton brothers. They were folk heroes to some and criminals to everyone. The U.S. Marshal Service spent considerable resources on rail security. The railroad spent considerably more. What almost none of them spent resources on was the possibility that the person robbing the train might be a woman. This was, in 1889, still considered unlikely. It was less unlikely than anyone thought. Cassidy Vane's real name was Catherine Marie Vanderburg. She had dropped both the Catherine and the Vanderburg at 18 when she left her father's farm in Kansas and went west. She was tall, dark-haired, and possessed of a quality that people described inadequately as presence. You were aware of her when she entered a room. What most people did not know, because she did not tell them, was that she had spent 2 years in Colorado, working as a bookkeeper for a mining operation before the mine failed, and the owner took the payroll and left the state. She was owed 14 months of wages. She was also owed, in her accounting, the sense of fundamental fairness that she had been raised to believe the world contained. The world, she had concluded by 1888, did not actually contain that. Yet she had turned to robbery with the same methodical approach she had brought to bookkeeping. She planned carefully. She took only from railroad companies and never from individuals. She had never fired her gun in a robbery. She was not particularly romantic about any of it. It was, she had decided, a practical solution to a practical problem. She had been doing it for 18 months when she climbed onto the Denver-Cheyenne train. She had no idea that John Prater was in the mail car. John Prater was 31 in 1889. He had been a marshal's deputy for 7 years, having come to the work from a brief and undistinguished career as a school teacher in Ohio. He was not a man who inspired immediate notice. Medium height, ordinary features, quiet in company. So what marked him out was the quality of his attention. When John Prater listened to you, you felt it, as though the full weight of his focus was on you alone. He had never been married. Had never, as far as anyone knew, been close to it. His letters to his sister in Ohio, recovered after his death, suggest that he had thought about what kind of life he wanted. Had thought about it carefully and concluded that the life of a frontier marshal's deputy was not compatible with the kind of life he wanted. That he was waiting for circumstances to change before he allowed himself to want things. He was, in other words, a man who was being very patient about living. He was in that mail car because he had been tracking a robbery pattern for 8 months. He had not expected the robber to be a woman. That was not, he wrote later, the reason he let her go. She dropped through the window. He was standing 6 feet away, gun already drawn. He had heard the sound on the roof. She registered him in the same second he registered her. Neither of them moved. "Put the gun down," she said. "I'm a deputy marshal," he said. "You put yours down. Mine isn't out." He looked at her hands. She was right. Her hands were empty. "I'm here for the mailbag," she said, completely steady, as though she were making a reasonable business request. "You're under arrest," he said. "You're going to have to do that," she said, "because I'm not going to stop otherwise." And then she said something that he would later describe, in a letter to his sister, as the strangest thing anyone had ever said to him in the performance of his duties. She said, "You've been tracking me for 8 months. You've read my pattern. You know I don't hurt anyone. And you know what this is about." He stared at her. "Vanderburg Mining," she said. "Look it up when you have a moment. The owner walked out with 14 months of payroll in 1887. Nobody arrested him. Nobody tracked him for 8 months. A long silence on a moving train. "I don't want the letters," she said. "I don't want any personal items. I just want the railroad payroll that's in that bag, because the railroad owes a debt that nobody official seems interested in collecting." John Prater thought about this for 3 seconds. Then he stepped aside. He didn't know why. He would spend years not knowing why. She took the bag. She left the mail. She climbed back out the window. He did not report the robbery for 36 hours. When he did, his description of the robber was insufficient. No case was made. He resigned as deputy marshal 14 months later. Cassidy Vane did not stop after Elk Creek Pass. She did 2 more jobs in the following 6 months, both successful, both following her established pattern. Railroad company payrolls, never personal property, never physical harm. She sent a portion of each take to the families of the Vanderburg mining workers through an intermediary. She had kept their names in her bookkeeping ledger. It was a strange kind of justice, imperfect and illegal, but it was what she had. John Prater left the Marshal's service in November 1890. He moved to a small town in Wyoming and opened a small business, a land surveying office. It was useful, quiet, and far from trains. He did not look for her. He told himself he had decided to stop looking. He was not being entirely honest with himself. In March of 1891, he received a letter on no return address. Postmarked Cheyenne. It said only, "I looked up Vanderburg. You had already been looking. The case file you forwarded to the Kansas Attorney General's office in 1888. The one that went nowhere. I found it. You tried. I didn't know that. I'm sorry I assumed you hadn't." CV, he wrote back to the postmaster in Cheyenne. Against all expectation, the letter reached her. What followed was a correspondence that lasted 8 months. He wrote carefully, the way a man writes when he knows that every word is being weighed against something enormous. She wrote directly, the way a woman writes when she has spent 3 years making decisions alone and has stopped apologizing for any of them. They wrote about the West, about what it had been and what it was becoming, about the railroad companies and the mining operations and the systematic way that the machinery of prosperity had managed to leave behind the people who had built it. They did not write about what had happened on the train. They did not write about what they were doing. In December 1891, he wrote that he was coming to Cheyenne on business. He left the date open. as the implication was that it would coincide with whatever might be convenient for her. She did not write back for 3 weeks. When she did, she wrote a single line. "I don't know how to do this without someone getting hurt." He understood what she meant. She was still wanted in 2 territories. He was a former officer of the law. Whatever they were doing in those letters, it could not lead anywhere that made sense. He sat with that letter for a long time. He was 33 years old. He had been very patient about living. He wrote back, "Neither do I, but I've been wrong about what I could afford to want before. I'd rather be wrong again than be certain and alone." He came to Cheyenne in February 1892. They met in the hotel dining room where she had, in what she described as a moment of either courage or complete recklessness, reserved a table under her real name, Catherine Vanderburg. They talked for 4 hours. He did not ask her to stop what she was doing. She did not ask him to pretend he had never been a marshal. They were both too honest for the kind of arrangement that required pretending. What they agreed on by the end of that dinner was this. She had 3 obligations remaining, 3 families from the mine still waiting for what she'd promised them. After that was done, she was done. She was done by June. In August of 1892, Catherine Vanderburg and John Prater married in a small service in Laramie, Wyoming. She used her real name. It was on the record. No warrant was ever issued for CV, the female robber of the Denver-Cheyenne line. The description Prater had filed in 1889 had been too vague. The cases were never formally linked. They had 3 children. He ran the surveying office for 20 years. She kept the books. She was, by every account of people who knew her in Laramie, the most scrupulously honest bookkeeper in Wyoming. Remember the mail car, the 4 minutes, the empty bag and both hands raised. In his letter to his sister, written in 1897, John Prater finally explained why he had stepped aside. He wrote, "She knew what I had been looking for. She knew I had tried and failed through proper means. She had already read the situation more accurately than I had. And I stepped aside because she was right and I knew it and there was no honest way to pretend otherwise." He added, "I've never regretted it. Not once." The story of Catherine Vanderburg and John Prater was never documented officially. It exists only in private letters, found by their granddaughter in a wooden box in 1967 and donated to the Wyoming State Archive. It is one of several hundred such boxes in archives across the American West. Collections of private letters, private diaries, private accounts of lives that the official record had no category for. The frontier was full of people making impossible decisions with imperfect information and incomplete power. The remarkable ones were not always the ones who followed the rules. Sometimes they were the ones who understood, in a single 4-minute encounter, what the rules had failed to do, and chose accordingly. Leave a comment. Whose choice would you have made in that mail car? And the next frontier love story, the one that crossed a war and 2 nations, is right here.